can't step off the wood. The mud on either side. It isn't mud anymore. It's breathing. And whatever is living under these planks, it just hit the bottom of my boots from underneath. It's striking the wood every time I take a step, waiting for me to miss. Now hush. Let me back up. Let me tell it right, the way the old-timers told it to me when I was young and foolish and still believed the mountain only wanted to be admired. The trail guides always tell you to keep your boots on the wood when the fog rolls heavy across the low gaps. They tell you the narrow, hand-hewn cedar puncheon boardwalks are a sanctuary from the unmapped, swallowing mud of the mountain wetlands. Stay on the planks, they say, like it's some simple commandment. But they never tell you why. They never warn you about the plank stretcher, the thing that waits in that black standing water beneath the bog bridges, patient as the stone itself, older than the trail, older maybe than the mountain's memory of being young. I've walked these ridge lines since before my knees started singing their own slow hymn of complaint. I've seen the fog come down off Brushy Mountain like a held breath finally let go, swallowing whole hollers in the space of a heartbeat. And I've crossed more bog bridges than I could rightly count, my boots thumping that same hollow, comforting rhythm against cedar boards laid down by hands long since turned to dust. There's a sound to safe wood, a sound you learn in your bones before you ever learn it in your head. A dry, solid, almost musical knock, plank after plank, steady as a heartbeat that hasn't yet learned to be afraid of itself. It was late October, the kind of October that doesn't ask your permission before it gets dark, when I found myself deep in the Roanoke Gap, further off the marked trail than any sensible man ought to wander alone. I'd lost the last gray smear of daylight somewhere around a ridge I didn't recognize, and the fog had come up out of the bog like the earth itself was exhaling something it had swallowed wrong a long, long time ago. It moved different than regular fog, friend. Regular fog drifts. This stuff crawled, low and thick and silver white, pooling first around the ankles, then the knees, rising with a slowness that felt deliberate, felt aware, like it was a tide measuring the exact height of a man before deciding how much of him it wanted to take. The temperature dropped so fast my breath started hanging in front of my face like little ghosts I'd birthed and abandoned. I had my headlamp, but the fog ate the light before it traveled 3 feet, turned the beam into a useless, milky smear that did nothing but make the dark beyond it feel deeper, hungrier. So I did what any man who spent his life in these mountains learns to do. I trusted my boots and the wood beneath them. I trusted that old hollow sound, that steady thump, thump, thump of boot against cedar plank, a rhythm as familiar to me as my own pulse. The bog around me had gone quiet in that particular way wetlands go quiet before something changes. No frogs, no night birds. Even the wind seemed to be holding itself perfectly still, like it didn't want to disturb whatever was listening. I remember thinking even then that the silence had a texture to it, a weight, like the whole bottom of that gap was an ear pressed up against the world, waiting. I walked maybe a half-mile like that, blind and trusting, counting my steps the way my granddaddy taught me, when my headlamp finally found something solid enough to hold its shape through the fog. The boardwalk ahead of me had broken, not rotted through gentle the way wood does over the slow turning of seasons, broken violent, splintered upward in jagged spears, like something underneath had pushed up through it once, hard, and then let it settle back down into ruin. A gap maybe 8 feet wide separated me from the unbroken planks on the other side, and in that gap was water black as a mine shaft, perfectly still, not a ripple disturbing its surface despite the cold wind that should have been kissing it. I stood there a long moment, my light trembling slightly across that black gap. And I want to tell you, friend, that stillness was the loudest thing I have ever witnessed. Water that still isn't natural. Water like that is holding its breath. I had 2 choices laid out before me, plain as a hand of cards. I could turn back, retrace my steps through that crawling fog, and try to find solid trail before full dark swallowed the gap whole. Or I could find a way across. And pride, that old familiar killer of mountain men since the first settler looked at an unclimbable peak and said, "I'll manage." Pride convinced me turning back was the coward's path. To my left, maybe 6 feet off the broken boardwalk, I saw it. A wide, flat patch of marsh grass, dense and green even in the gray light, rising just slightly above the black water around it. It looked solid. It looked, God forgive me, like a shortcut, like the kind of ground a man's boot could trust. I told myself it was just grass growing over a shallow shelf of earth. I told myself the trail guides exaggerated, the way old stories always do, dressing up simple drowning hazards in folklore clothing to scare children into staying careful. I told myself a lot of things in that gap, standing on the edge of safe wood, staring at temptation dressed up as solid ground. And then I stepped off the boardwalk. The moment my boot left that cedar plank, friend, something in the air itself seemed to shift, like a held note finally resolving into something far worse than silence. My foot sank only an inch into that marsh grass, no deeper, solid enough to bear my weight just like I'd hoped, just like I'd convinced myself it would. Relief flooded through me, warm and stupid and short-lived, because that's when I felt it. A vibration, deep and slow, traveling up through the earth and into the sole of my boot, rising through my ankle, my shin, settling somewhere cold in the pit of my stomach. Not a sound exactly, a pressure, like something enormous had just turned its attention toward the exact spot where I stood, the way a sleeping dog's ear twitches toward an unfamiliar footstep before it's even fully woken. I didn't wait to understand it further. Some old animal instinct buried deep beneath all my mountain-bred logic screamed at me to move, and I scrambled the remaining steps across that grass faster than my aching knees had any right to carry me, throwing myself back onto the unbroken boardwalk on the far side with a desperate, undignified lunge. I lay there a moment, chest heaving, the cedar planks cool and damp beneath my palms, and I told myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Nerves, fog-addled fear playing tricks on a tired old man's senses. And I stood up, brushed myself off, and started walking again, telling myself the worst of it was already behind me. And that's when I understood, slowly, dreadfully, that the boardwalk had changed its rules entirely. I want you to picture it the way I experienced it, slow and creeping. The boardwalk that should have ended, that should have connected back to the main trail within another quarter mile, simply did not end. I walked further still. The planks continued, identical and unbroken, vanishing into fog ahead of me exactly as they vanished into fog behind me, like I'd been swallowed into some pocket of the mountain that existed outside the ordinary stretching of distance. And then I heard it, the first thump. It came from directly beneath my left boot, the instant my weight settled onto that plank. A heavy, deliberate thud, like a fist striking wood from the other side, patient and certain. Not the hollow echo of a footstep, something heavier than that, denser, like flesh and bone wrapped in something cold and leathery, slapping itself flat against the underside of the board to feel exactly where I'd planted my weight, exactly how much of me there was to measure. I froze. The fog swirled lazy around my knees, and beneath my feet, silence. A held, patient silence, the kind that waits to see what a man will do next. I took another step, testing, my heart hammering so loud I was certain whatever lived beneath that wood could hear it as clear as I heard my own boots. Thump. Right beneath my right foot this time, the instant it landed. Never a beat behind. Matching me. Tracking me. Learning the rhythm of my body the way a predator learns the rhythm of prey it intends to take its time with. Prey it has already decided it owns. I want you to understand, friend, that the thing beneath those planks never once showed itself, not in any way I could swear to, not in any way my eyes could carry home with me, not a shape in the black water below, not a ripple, not a glimpse of anything beyond that relentless, patient thumping that rose to meet every single step I dared to take. It didn't need to show itself. It already had my measure, my weight, my stride length, the particular hitch in my gait from an old injury in my left hip that flares up worse in cold weather. It was learning me, the way you'd learn a song you intended to play back perfectly, later, when it mattered most, when the audience was least prepared to hear it. I tried walking faster, hoping speed might confuse whatever rhythm it had built of me. The thumps came faster, too, matched precisely, never lagging, never anticipating wrong. I tried walking slower, dragging out each step with agonizing patience, hoping stillness might bore it into losing interest. And the thing beneath the boards matched that too, drawing out its own response with a kind of mockery, like it found my fear amusing in some cold, ancient way that had nothing to do with hunger and everything to do with cruelty refined over centuries of quiet, patient practice. Then came the part I still struggle to speak about, even now, even years removed from that gap, even with these mountains grown gentler around me with age. I paused, just to breathe, just to gather whatever scraps of courage remained scattered inside my chest. And in that pause, in that single moment where my boots held still against the planks, the thump came anyway. A single heavy strike directly beneath my right boot, even though I hadn't moved, even though there was no fresh footstep to track, no new disturbance against the wood to respond to, nothing at all to explain its timing except certainty. It was telling me it didn't need my movement anymore. It already knew exactly where I stood, exactly where I would stand a moment later, and the moment after that. It was simply reminding me that it could reach me whenever it decided the waiting had gone on long enough, that the waiting itself was its own kind of pleasure. I started walking again, faster this time, the fog thickening around me until I couldn't see more than a few planks ahead. The boardwalk narrowing, friend, actually narrowing. The boards on either side beginning to tilt upward at the edges, like the whole structure was being slowly pinched from beneath by something patient and immovable. I had to brace my boots with surgical precision now, heel to toe, arms out for balance like a man walking a fence rail, while that relentless thumping kept perfect, patient time beneath me, never once missing its mark. The cedar groaned under that pressure, a low, wet creaking that sounded unsettlingly like something breathing, like the wood itself had become a held breath, about to be released, all at once, all over me. I felt the boards shift beneath my weight, not collapsing but bowing, flexing downward toward that black water before springing back with a wet, sucking resistance that left my stomach lurching with every single step, every single test of whether the wood would hold a moment longer. I don't know how long I walked that narrowing, endless path. Time loses its shape entirely in a place like that. Fog erasing the moon, erasing the stars, erasing every ordinary marker a man uses to measure how far he's traveled or how long he's been traveling it, leaving only the wood beneath him and the thing beneath the wood. I only know that somewhere in that endless walking I stopped believing I would ever see the trailhead again. I stopped believing in maps, in distance, in the simple mercy of an ending, the way a man stops believing in summer somewhere deep into a winter that refuses to break. The boardwalk had become my entire world, narrow and wet and groaning, suspended over patient black water that wanted nothing more than for my balance to fail just once. Just one single misstep into mud that wasn't mud anymore, into water that wasn't merely water, into whatever lay waiting just beneath that thin, trembling skin of stillness. And I understood, with a clarity that felt almost peaceful in its terrible simplicity, that I would walk this stretch of cedar boards until my body simply could not walk anymore, until my legs gave out beneath me the way the boards themselves seemed always on the verge of giving way. That the mountain doesn't forgive the broken boundary between wood and earth, not once it's been crossed, not for any reason a frightened man might offer in his own defense. That some old, patient hunger beneath these bogs has been waiting centuries for careless feet to step where they shouldn't. And once it has your measure, once it knows the particular rhythm of your stride, the particular hitch in your hip, there is no boardwalk long enough to outrun it. No fog thick enough to hide you from something that hunts by feeling rather than sight, by patience rather than speed. So if you ever find yourself deep in these gaps, friend, when the autumn fog comes crawling low and silver across the wetlands, thick enough to swallow your own outstretched hand, and you come upon a broken stretch of boardwalk with black water waiting still and patient on either side, I am begging you, with whatever weight my old voice still carries across these years, to turn back. Walk the long way around, however far it takes you out of your way. Wait for daylight if you must, even if it costs you a cold and miserable night spent shivering on solid ground. Because that patch of solid-looking grass beside the broken wood is not a shortcut, whatever your tired legs and your wounded pride try to tell you in that moment. It is an invitation, and the thing that answers it does not forget the weight of those who accept. Not ever. Not even after the years have worn smooth every other memory a man carries. I still walk these mountains, even now, all these years removed from that endless gap. My knees worse, my hands shakier, my nights longer than they used to be. But I never step off the wood anymore. Not for shortcuts, not for pride, not for anything this world has ever offered me in trade for that single, careless choice. Because somewhere, friend, deep beneath some forgotten stretch of cedar planking, in water black and still as held breath, something is still listening, still patient, still remembering the exact rhythm of footsteps it never quite got the chance to finish learning. Footsteps it is still waiting, with all the patience this old mountain never taught it, to hear again. And the mountain, friend, the mountain never forgets a debt left unpaid. It only waits for the fog to roll in thick enough, and for some other tired, careless soul to mistake a patch of grass for solid ground.